A tree that stands alone must grow its roots deeper than all the others, or it will fall with the first strong wind. Brothers, listen closely. There is a silence in the life of a man who walks alone. It is not weakness, it is not failure, it is the sound of discipline echoing in solitude. Society may look at him with pity. Why is he alone? They whisper, but the truth is far more complex and far more powerful. Some men leave alone because they are broken, others because they are building. Not every man seeks a woman to complete him. Some seek themselves first. Most people misunderstand solitude. They see a man who lives alone and assume he is lonely, incomplete, or simply waiting for someone to fill the emptiness. But the truth is often the opposite. Choosing to live alone is not a sign of weakness. It is a deliberate step into self-discovery and strength. It takes courage to step away from the comfort of companionship and face the silence of one's own company. That silence can be loud. It echoes with thoughts, memories, regrets, and dreams, and only the strong have the will to sit with those echoes, to listen, and to grow. A man who lives without a woman is not necessarily lacking something. He may be walking a path few understand, a path of transformation. Without anyone to distract or validate him, he is forced to look inward. He must learn to understand himself, discipline himself, and rebuild himself from within. There is no one to tell him what he's worth. He has to decide that for himself, and in doing so, he develops something rare, unshakable inner strength. Living alone does not mean a man is broken. Sometimes it means he is building. It is easier to distract ourselves with relationships than to confront our own shadows. But the man who stands alone has chosen to face those shadows head on. He is not hiding from the world. He is preparing for it. Society may call it loneliness, but those who walk this path with clarity know better. This is not weakness. This is strength in its rawest form. It is a silent forge where warriors are shaped, not with noise, not with applause, but with quiet endurance and unwavering focus. The man who walks alone on purpose is far from empty. He is full of fire the world has yet to see. A man who chooses to live alone must do more than simply exist in silence. He must bring structure to that silence. Without discipline, solitude quickly turns into a trap. Time drifts, the mind wanders, and days begin to blur into each other. But when a man fills that silence with intention, it becomes his greatest tool. Every hour becomes a decision. Every habit becomes a reflection of who he is becoming. In this space, the value of routine and self-mastery becomes clear. Waking early, moving the body, feeding the mind, controlling desires. These are no longer tasks. They are acts of self-respect. Purpose gives meaning to the quiet. When there is no one to impress, no one to please, the only motivation that remains is internal. That's where true awareness begins. He must become conscious of his thoughts, his energy, and his direction. No longer distracted by constant noise or external emotions, he begins to feel the rhythm of life in a deeper way. He notices his moods, his reactions, his triggers, and through that observation, he gains control. Living alone demands more than stillness. It demands clarity. Why am I here? What am I building? Who am I becoming? These are the questions that echo in the absence of company. If he doesn't answer them, the silence consumes him. But if he does, the silence guides him. Every man who walks this path must choose, drift into darkness or rise through discipline. The difference lies in his awareness. The man who is awake to himself will use solitude as a sharpening stone. He does not waste time in emptiness. He fills it with mastery, and in doing so, he transforms his loneliness into a weapon and his discipline into an unstoppable force. When a man leaves alone, he is stripped of external emotional support. There is no one to tell him that everything will be okay, no one to offer reassurance on a difficult day. There are no comforting words at night, no warm smile to start the morning. In this space, the man must learn to rely entirely on himself. He must become the source of his own strength, encouragement, and peace. This is not an easy task. It requires him to develop a deep inner resilience, one that does not crumble under pressure or fear. He must find stability not from another person, but from within. Self-reliance is born in silence. When no one is there to motivate him, he must become his own fire. He cannot afford to wait for the right mood, the right time, or the right words. He must act because his future depends on it. This forces him to grow. The comfort that once came from someone else must now come from his own actions, his own choices. Every step forward becomes a quiet declaration, I am enough. This journey changes a man. He begins to take full responsibility for his emotional state. He no longer blames others for his pain, nor does he expect them to heal it. Instead, he learns to sit with discomfort, to breathe through struggle, and to find answers within. The man who walks alone becomes a calm force. He doesn't chase validation. He doesn't depend on praise. He knows who he is because he has earned that knowledge through solitude. This kind of strength cannot be faked. It is forged in the quiet hours, in the moments where most would reach for someone else. He stands alone not because he must, but because he can. And that is rare power. When a man chooses to live alone, he is left face to face with the mirror, both the physical one and the internal one. There is no one to impress, no one to pretend for, no one to hide behind. The image he sees reflects not just his appearance, but his truth. This truth can be uncomfortable, even painful, because it reveals all the flaws, regrets, weaknesses, and wasted potential that are easy to ignore when life is noisy and full of distractions. Alone, there is no escape. The mirror becomes a teacher that cannot be silenced. In solitude, a man begins to confront who he really is. He sees his patterns, his habits, his fears. He recognizes the excuses he's made and the time he's lost. This confrontation is not pleasant, but it is necessary. Without it, there can be no growth. A man who never faces himself will never truly know himself. But the one who has the courage to look deep into his own reflection begins a process of transformation that is as powerful as it is rare. This reflection teaches responsibility. It teaches humility. It reveals both pain and potential. And from this understanding, a man gains direction. He doesn't need to be told what to do. He begins to feel it. The mirror does not lie, but it also does not judge. It simply shows, and the man who accepts what he sees can begin to shape what he becomes. With every passing day, he sheds false identities and steps closer to authenticity. The process is quiet, often lonely, but always true. In the mirror of solitude, the man does not find perfection. He finds honesty, and with that honesty, he gains the power to change, not for others, but for himself. That is where real freedom begins. Stillness is something few people truly experience in a world full of constant noise, motion, and distraction. But for a man who lives alone, stillness becomes his daily companion. At first, it can be unsettling. The absence of chatter, the lack of movement, the quiet moments with no one around can feel like emptiness. But in time, stillness reveals its hidden strength. It becomes a teacher, not with words, but with presence. In that calm space, a man begins to observe life differently. His senses sharpen, his thoughts deepen, and he starts to hear the subtle messages his own mind and body send him. When there is no one else to engage with, every moment alone becomes an opportunity to reflect, to center, and to reset. The rush to respond, react, or perform fades away. What remains is clarity. He begins to understand the patterns of his emotions, the rise and fall of his energy, and the impact of his habits. Stillness offers a rare kind of wisdom, the kind that cannot be found in books or conversations. It is the wisdom of watching, waiting, and listening without judgment. Over time, the man realizes that he no longer fears being alone. In fact, he begins to crave these quiet hours, not as a retreat, but as a return to self. In this peace, he finds focus. In the silence, he finds answers. And with this awareness, he moves through the world with greater calm, confidence, and intention. While others are swept away by chaos, he remains grounded. He becomes unmoved by noise because he has learned the language of silence. The man who embraces stillness does not escape life. He prepares for it. He meets the world not with noise, but with quiet strength that nothing can shake. True mastery begins where distraction ends. When a man lives alone, stripped of outside validation and constant companionship, he is forced to turn inward. This inner journey is not glamorous, it's not loud, it does not offer instant rewards or applause, but it is the path to something deeper, personal mastery. Without anyone else to rely on, the man learns that the greatest obstacles are not external, they are within. His fears, doubts, impulses, laziness, and limiting beliefs rise to the surface. He must face them not once, but again and again until he understands their roots and learns to overcome them. This process demands consistent effort. A man must learn to discipline his body, control his mind, and open his spirit, not for anyone else, but for himself. He must create structure where there is none. He must cultivate peace in the midst of uncertainty, and he must develop the strength to act not based on mood, but based on mission. Each day alone becomes a test. Will he rise with purpose, or drift aimlessly? Will he sharpen his skills, or numb his senses? These choices, made in silence, shape the man who becomes. Over time, something shifts. The man who once felt uncertain begins to carry himself with quiet confidence, not because he has conquered the world, but because he has begun to conquer himself. He no longer needs to prove anything. He knows what he is capable of. He doesn't seek praise. He seeks alignment with his values, his goals, his truth. The world may see a man who is alone, but in reality, they are witnessing someone who has found his center. That is the beginning of real power, not over others, but over the only thing that truly matters, the self. From that place, everything else becomes possible.